Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. All right, everyone, welcome back to another fantastic episode of Pour and Explore. We are a wine, a food, and a travel podcast. This is the place where we journey through the most exciting corners of the wine world and the food world and the travel world. And today I'll be taking you on a personal tour of my favorite wine growing regions. Some of the most breathtaking and some of the most delicious places on earth. My tagline here on Port Explorer, of course, is keep wondering and wondering. And the wondering part is why I do this show. I love to teach people about wine. I love to answer your wine questions. I absolutely recommend would love if you have any questions, any feedback, you'd like to tell me about some of your favorite wine, food, or travel stories. Hit me up. Go catch me on one of my socials, Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, of course. And of course, please subscribe to this podcast if you like what you hear. I was thinking about what to do for episode number 3 here, and I would love to just talk about some of my favorite places. I have visited all of these places, and I'll tell you what, they are not only visually stunning places to be, but the people and the culture and, of course, the wine on every single one of these places. Highly recommend heading over there. So let's dive in with an easy one. I'm going to talk a lot in this podcast about the difference between old world wines and new world wines. And it's really a simple breakdown. Old world means Europe. When people talk about old world wines, we are talking about places like Italy. We are talking about places like Germany, Spain, of course. And then you get into some of the other regions, which we've talked about on previous episodes. Serbia and Georgia and Greece and, of course, Romania. And then we cannot talk about wine being grown in Europe without talking about the seat of wine in Europe. And that, in my opinion, is absolutely France. France has been producing wine for thousands of years. In certain parts of Europe, they've been growing wine for a lot longer than that. But France has been producing some of the world's most amazing wines, certainly some of the world's most expensive wines, but the quality, the care, and the culture that they put into their wines coming out of France, in my opinion, is second to none. We're going to talk about a lot of regions today, but we're going to focus on France a little bit first. Let's take you up to a lesser known area in France, and that is called the Loire Valley. If you think about France as, if you think about it as a square or a rectangle, the Loire Valley you're going to find on the top left corner of that rectangle. And Loire is, as most wine regions is off of a body of water, is off of a river, and Loire is known for its crisp white wines. You're going to find white wines, Sauvignon Blanc up there. Chenin Blanc is another fantastic grape that they produce up there. They make amazing rosés. I would put rosé from the Loire Valley made from Pinot Noir up against some of the world's best rosés, even the ones that are produced a little bit further south in France. Loire does just an amazing job with rosés. And then we talk about the red production is on the limited side. Pinot Noir is the main red grape in that area, and they are producing some really cool stuff that I definitely want you to try. From a travel point of view, obviously, most of France goes back to the Roman Empire, and before you've got beautiful castles in that region, the charm of the riverside villages in Loire, and a lot of versatility in the style of wines that they are producing. Fun fact, the Loire Valley is called, the nickname of that area is called the Garden of France. Just the lush, beautiful greenery, rolling hills, and just absolutely stunning beauty from top to bottom. And I highly recommend that you head over to Loire if you're going to be visiting France. So it's a relatively small country compared to the US, but if you're able to make it, I would definitely want to get in there. A little bit further south and more to the east is probably we'll call it the second most famous region in France, and that is Burgundy. Burgundy is, of course, celebrated for its Pinot Noir and its Chardonnay. Now, as a Pinot drinker and a Chardonnay drinker and someone who used to produce Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, I am partial to the Burgundy region for that reason. But as I mentioned earlier, the very similar to Loire, and wine making is ingrained in the culture in Burgundy. I was able to spend, oh goodness, about 2 weeks in the Burgundy region a few years back and absolutely I fell in love with the food. I am a big fan of the regional foods that come from the Burgundy region, and they use flavors in that area that are second to none in French. The freshness, the culture of just small home cooking is really amazing. And cheese, oh my goodness, cheese in Burgundy. My favorite cheese coming from that region is called Epoisse. It is a wash rind cheese that goes exceptionally well with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And that is a wonderful pairing that I highly recommend you try. The terroir in the Burgundy region is, I would call it diverse, but most vineyards are similar to one another. If you think about the Rhone River coming from the north of France, winding down on the east side of the country, you've got amazing vineyards that are grown all along that river, and the growing in those regions happen. I'm going to use the word terraces, but there's not necessarily a terrace. There are the cru level wines that are grown in that region. There are the village level wines. You then have the premier cru wines, and then your grand cru production as well. And those are all on different levels as you come up the slope from the river into the mountains that are on either side of that Rhone River in France. And they've been doing it this way for a long time, hundreds of years, if not going into thousands of years. I had the opportunity to visit the Burgundy region recently, starting in Dijon and working our way all the way down to the southern tip of the Burgundy growing area. And the wines are diverse. The Pinot Noirs are diverse. The Chardonnays are diverse. And I was actually even able to go to a barrel producer there in Rhone, actually the company that made the barrels that I used to use for my wine. And holy smokes, let me tell you, that was a super fun experience and an eye-opening experience. What goes into producing a wine barrel for a really fine wine, from sourcing the wood in that region, producing it in that region, toasting it, hand making almost each and every piece of that barrel. It really opened my eyes, and just that tiny little sliver of what it takes to make a great glass of wine ultimately, and the care and attention. And again, the culture that goes into it. Very cool stuff. I will absolutely be going back to the Burgundy region and enjoying some of my favorite Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays. Now, on that same river, you go down a little bit further south and you're going to run into the Rhone Valley region, or the Côte du Rhône, as they call it in France. And this is where you get into some more diverse regions that are producing different grapes, different styles, and just really amazing stuff. The Rhone region on the red side is known for its Syrah and Grenache and a few other red grapes. And then on the white side, Viognier is a huge production there in the Rhone area, along with Roussanne and Marsanne. Really fun white wines to try if you've never tried them. Definitely want to check those out. You can't find many Roussannes or Marsannes in a single varietal. They're out there. They're typically produced here in the States, here in California. But if you can get your hands on a single varietal Roussanne or Marsanne, I highly recommend it. Viognier is pretty easy to find as a standalone grape. And then, of course, you can find amazing Syrahs and Grenaches as standalone. But in the region that I'm talking about, they are typically blended with one another, not only on the white side, but also on the red side. And they just produce some of the world's greatest bold red wines without that overdoing it. That some areas outside of France do. Big reds like Cabernet Sauvignon coming from the Bordeaux region, or Neo from Rioja in Spain, that tend to be real big, luscious wines. The red wines that are coming out of the Rhone Valley are a little more tame, but equally delicious and absolutely fantastic. You've got the diverse regions, as I talked about in the Rhone area. You've got places like Côte-Rôtie to the north and Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which is a very cool area. And I want to do a standalone episode about Châteauneuf-du-Pape because I spent a lot of time there, and it is a very cool and one of the more unique growing regions, I would say, in the world. It's a really fun place to see. It's a fun place to drink wine. It's a fun place to see wine growing. So I think I'll do a standalone episode about the Châteauneuf-du-Pape sometime this year. So stay tuned for that. Creux Hermitage, with these beautiful terraced vineyards coming up out of the river, and of course the vibrancy of the cuisine they produce in that area. A little more dedicated to seafood as you get further south, closer to the Mediterranean. Lots of great seafood in that area. And again, going back to the Roman Empire, the medieval villages in the Rhone Valley are absolutely stunning. I'm talking about real walled off towns that were built and protected by the Roman soldiers, and those places still exist. If you are a history buff, obviously anywhere in France, you're going to get lots of great history, but this is a particularly very cool spot, coming from Lyon and working your way down into Nice and Cannes and so on, and all of the beautiful regions in between, the beautiful river, and of course the wine growing regions are very cool. So I think I've said enough about that, and we're going to take you a little bit further north. And one of my favorite growing regions, so one of my favorite wines, is German Riesling. And there is no more famous spot for growing Riesling in the country of Germany than the Mosel Valley. The Mosel River is I don't know if they refer to it as a tributary, but it is a tributary, an offshoot of the Rhine River in France. And it is so much fun to be there. I'm actually excited to be heading there later this year. If you have not heard, you definitely want to check out my Rhine River cruise that I am doing with my partners, Ama Waterways and Vacations by Andrea. I'm going to be your wine host on a 10-day river cruise through Northern Europe. And we are going to be hitting the Mosel Valley, and I'm excited to bring some stuff from the States, and we're going to visit vineyards, and we're going to talk about wine, and we're going to do wine pairings and tastings, and it's going to be a really fun trip. So definitely don't miss that if you or someone that loves that kind of thing. We leave on the 2nd of November, 2025. And again, it's a 10-day trip, and I'm super excited about that. The Mosel River is very similar to the southern Rhone River with steep vineyards that come out of the river valley, and a lot of them are terraced, which makes it extraordinarily labor intensive to not only grow the grapes, but to harvest the grapes and the stuff that they are producing, especially the exceptional Riesling and that they are producing in all levels of sweetness coming out of that area. Absolutely stunning. One of the things I love about German Riesling is the fact that they are so well balanced. The interplay of the sweetness and the acidity and the minerality that they're able to pull out of these grapes based on the growing climate and, of course, the winemaking practices and of course, the terroir, the land that it's grown on, make these wines really exceptional. And I'm really looking forward to going back and visiting some of my favorite places there and taking you along with me. So check out that wine cruise. You can find more information about that on my website at thewineguy.vin, thewineguy.vin. Check that out. Again, that leaves November the 2nd of 2025. So definitely get signed up for that before all of those seats are gone. I talked a little bit about, and I hope I didn't seem like I was bad-mouthing this next region, but I absolutely love the amazing, structured, and age-worthy red wines that are coming from the Rioja region of Spain. They're making some cool white wines there as well, but much like Pinot Noir is king in Burgundy and Syrah is king in the Rhone Valley, Tempranillo is the mainstay of wine coming out of the Rioja region of Spain. And that's going to be right around the center, a little further north to the center of the country. And they're producing really cool things. From a historical perspective, that region has been producing wine and producing tons of wine for thousands of years. Again, going back to the Roman Empire and before. Just super cool to see these vineyards that have been around for hundreds of years in the same family for hundreds of years, if not longer. And again, I cannot talk enough about the culture. The wine culture in Europe it's amazing. They put so much blood, sweat, and tears into producing these products. And I really would love, if anything, from this podcast is for everyone to have a re-energized respect for wine and the people that produce it. From someone who worked in the vineyards and worked in a winery for many years, getting my hands dirty and putting a lot of love and attention into producing wine. If I want you to take anything away from what I talk about in this podcast over the years, it's the amount of love and work that goes into producing that bottle for you. So please respect it, and thank you in advance for doing that. Of course, there is a huge food culture in Spain as well, going from simple country dishes, stews, and roasted meats and things like that. But of course, we can't talk about the country of Spain without talking about tapas. Tapas are the mainstay of cultural cuisine in Spain, and just these small bites, these small plates of food that's very shareable. It goes back to what I was talking earlier about food and wine, for that matter, as something that brings us together. These are things that bring us together as human beings to share a meal, to share a glass of wine, to share an experience with a friend or a family member, or heck, someone that you just met. I can't think of a better way to spend time with someone than is to break bread, or in this case, break some tortilla española or something like that. Were made to pair well with Spanish wine. They are made to pair well with the great ciders that are coming out of Spain as well. The country of Spain is not single dimensional when it comes to their their alcoholic beverage offerings, beer as well. But let's put a little highlight on the awesome ciders that are coming out of Spain as well. Really great stuff. All right. So let's head over a little bit to the east, and we're going to go into one of my favorite places in the world, which is the country of Italy, and more specifically, the Tuscany region. When we think about the country of Italy, of course, they are growing wine on every single corner of that country, way up in the north in the Piedmont area to down south in Puglia and Sicily, of course. The island of Sicily is growing some really cool stuff, but Italy is synonymous with Chianti Classico, Chianti Reserva, your Super Tuscans that became very popular 20 or so years ago. Brunello's, just absolutely fantastic wine coming from that region. And of course, the seat of the Roman Empire in that region as well. Cities like Rome and Florence are absolutely visit worthy, bucket list worthy places to be. So if you're able to get out there, definitely do that. Italy for me is unique among the European wine regions because the stuff that they're producing, I can't say it any different than there's a rusticness to Italian wine. There is a minerality to it. There is just this very unique quality to the things that they are producing, particularly among red wines. Chianti, i.e. Sangiovese grape. The wines that they're producing are completely unique for that area of the world, again, in my perspective, and absolutely worth trying. The connection between the wine culture in Italy to the food culture, of course, a buzz term that I've heard recently is the slow food movement in a lot of places, but in Italy, just sitting around a table and talking and eating and drinking and loving and enjoying each other's company and so on. Again, that's what it's all about. Let's just get together and we're going to eat over a quarter-hour period, and we're going to have a great time with friends and family. And it is super, super cool. Definitely highly recommend that area. In my Tuscany experience, one of my favorite things that I saw while there were these huge stone vats of olive oil. They were this vineyard that we went to, this particular vineyard that I'm talking about. Of course, we're producing Sangiovese, but they were also growing olives and making homemade olive oil every year as well. And these beautiful foras that just sat in the middle of this room, and that's where they kept their olive oil. And let me tell you, the smells, the aromas from the room that I'm in, it's been a lot of years, but I still dream about the aromas that were in that room when I had the opportunity to go in there. Absolutely stunning and absolutely beautiful, and a huge memory for me. So if that's something that you were able to do, and I'm totally spacing on the name of the vineyard that was at, but there's no shortage of those. There are vineyards that go back 500, 600, 700 years in that region. So you're going to find something that you love, and you're going to find an amazing experience in the Tuscany region of France. Highly recommend. All right, so let's move out of the old world, and we're going to dive into the new world. We're going to talk about some of my favorite places, and I'm going to highlight 2 countries right now. Of course, there are lots more. I'm planning a trip to South America right now where I'm talking about doing a 10-day journey through South America, specifically Argentina in South America, as well as Chile. So I'm excited about that. Stay tuned for more information about those trips. But I want to talk a little bit about one of the smaller growing regions in the New World, and that is New Zealand, and very specifically the Marlborough region of New Zealand. Now, about 15 or so years ago, Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough, New Zealand, really took flight and became one of the most popular wines here in the States. That grassy, that zesty, citrusy Eucalyptus Sauvignon Blanc that is coming out of Marlborough. Not only great for beginner wine drinkers, not only stylistically easy to drink, but coming in at really great price points as well. 5, 6, 10, $15 for a bottle of really stunning Sauvignon Blanc from the Marlborough region. So not only easy to drink, but very affordable as well. Now, the climate in that area is going to be a little bit cooler. So white wine is definitely going to grow really well. They chose Sauvignon Blanc to really put a highlight on, and you're going to get really vibrant, fruit driven and mineral driven profiles in your wine. I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you've had a glass of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc before, so I don't need to tell you the uniqueness of it. If you have not, all I say is go out and get yourself a bottle of wine from Marlborough, a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. And I would say that New Zealand, particularly the Marlborough region, is, well, I'm going to give them a shout out for being a driver behind the world's sustainability, organic wine practices. They're really taking care of what they're doing down there. And a lot of those practices, a lot of those ideals, a lot of that sustainable culture has poured over into other regions of the world. Thank you to New Zealand for spearheading a lot of those and coming up a lot with a lot of those sustainable practices as well. It's a very cool place to visit, figuratively and literally. So I highly recommend that as well. And those wines, of course, are readily available here in the States. I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of wine regions here in California. I would be remiss if we did not talk about Sonoma County here in California. We all know about Napa. We all know about Paso Robles, but Sonoma County is so diverse, not only in the growing of grapes, but also in the microclimates that it has along the Russian River, up in the mountains, closer to the coast, the growing areas, soils, and of course, the wine practices up there are very cool. You're going to find, of course, your standbys coming from Sonoma County, things like Pinot Noir, as well as Chardonnay, but they're really producing some very cool Zinfandels, cool climate Zinfandels coming out of Sonoma, as well as some really fun and delicious sparkling wines. So if you've not had an opportunity to taste any sparkling wine from Sonoma, I definitely highly recommend that. And the thing I love about Sonoma County is, yes, it's right there next to Napa. They're neighbors, but the laid back style definitely goes along with what I do. I'm a laid back wine guy. You drink what you like and all of that stuff. As my motto says, I really vibe with the sophistication, the laid back sophistication of Sonoma wine country. So you cannot miss it. Now, the last region that I'm going to talk about, I am partial to because I spent a lot of years in vineyards up in Monterey County, as well as producing wine and selling wine, tasting wine, meeting my neighbors and seeing all of the cool things that they were doing. Monterey County, California, in my opinion, produces the greatest grapes and wine in California. And again, I'm partial because that's my experience, but I will tell you that the things that are coming out of Monterey County, California are absolutely stunning. Cool climate for the most part. There are some warm spots in Monterey, but for the most part, it is a cool climate growing area. Similar to Sonoma County, they're growing a lot of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But you're going to find really cool things down there, some varietals that you may not have heard before. And there are vast swaths of vineyards growing in Monterey County that are producing everything from Cabernet Sauvignon to Carmenere, Italian varietals, where Taj, things from South Africa. You're going to find really fun things coming out of that area, and I highly recommend doing that. Being right off of the ocean, you're getting a lot of that Pacific Ocean influence into the grapes as well. So think warm days and cool nights, especially in the more mountainous areas. There's a lot of hills and valleys in Monterey County, some narrow valleys as well as some wider valleys. And you get, again, similar to Sonoma, you get a lot of diverse soils, everything from rocky limestone soils up in the mountains to more river wash soils. There's a great area up there in Monterey County called the Arroyo Seco, and there's an old dried riverbed that runs through that area, and they're making some really fun wines growing in that cool temperature, that cool climate, and those very unique soils. And it's underrated. You're down here in San Diego, where I am pushing through my wine guide business. I am pushing the wines from Monterey County because they are sorely underrepresented here in restaurants as well as wine shops and so on. So I've made it my personal mission to make relationships with some of my old friends and colleagues up in the area. And what I want to do is bring Monterey County to at least put it in the spotlight in a big city like San Diego, so we can really appreciate the things that these winemakers are doing. And I'm really excited about it. All right. Why do these regions matter? These regions matter because some of them are more famous, some of them are less famous. The reason that they hold a special place in my heart is I would say it's the entire story. It's the people. You've heard me say it before, the people, the culture, the food, and the wine in these places make them stand out for me. And they really have shaped my journey as a wine expert and a wine drinker and an enthusiast. I absolutely love what they're doing in these places, and I cannot say enough. But of course, our time is limited here on this podcast, so I'm going to stop it there. If you are interested in visiting any of these regions, reach out to me. If you already have a travel agent, go talk to your travel agent, plan a trip to one of these places. Of course, if you can't go all the way to New Zealand, you're going to find great things right here in California. And I just can't say enough about them. If you need a referral to a great travel expert, hit me up and I would be happy to share some of my favorite travel experts with you. All right. In closing today on this episode of Pour and Explore, we talked about some regions in France. We talked about some awesome regions outside of Europe here in California. And I've got a lot more to come. There's so much to cover in wine. So that's why I'm doing this podcast 4 times a month. If you have any ideas for the show, again, definitely hit me up on one of the socials. Check me out on YouTube. You can subscribe there. You can subscribe on Apple and Spotify and wherever you get your podcast. I appreciate you listening. Check out on my website, check out the trips that I've got coming up. And if you're interested in any of those, you'll find ways to get a hold of me for those upcoming trips. And I've got some great interviews coming up as well, so stay tuned for those. And as I always say, whatever you do, please keep wondering and please keep wondering. Cheers, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.